Hi, it's Katrina. Some civilizations were so advanced they came up with incredible things that we don't really give them credit for. There are so many things that seem so out of place that they just don't fit in history. But as always, history is full of surprises. The 1200-year-old telephone. 1200 years ago, a mighty civilization in Peru invented something you and I still use on a daily basis, or all the time. It's been one of the most important inventions in human history. Yet nobody had imagined that this thing, this crucial part of modern life, was made by such an ancient culture. I'm talking about the telephone, the very device that you might be watching this video on right now. Archaeologists found the remains of a very old telephone in the ruins of Chan Chan, the abandoned coastal city of the Chimu people. The Chimu was an incredible culture. Their beautiful capital of Chan Chan, or Sun Sun in English, was a sprawling metropolis of mud brick buildings. It's still considered the largest adobe site on the planet. At its height, around the year 1200 AD, it was the biggest city in South America. Over 100,000 people lived inside its walls. The ruins are in such rough shape these days that it's difficult to imagine what life was like in the Grand Chimu capital. There must have been bustling markets and towering palaces. When they were conquered by the Inca in 1470, the Chimu culture faded away. But they aren't forgotten. Scientists know the Chimu came up with some of the greatest inventions of the ancient world. This telephone is a perfect example of their ingenuity. Ramiro Matos of the National Museum of the American Indian said it's the only one of its kind ever discovered. Not even the Egyptians had telephones. Here it is, the picture taken from the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian. If the first thing that comes to mind is those silly string telephones you used to build as a kid, that's precisely right. It's a rudimentary communication device that predates the earliest telephone research from 1833. Researchers haven't been able to test the actual relic because it's so old and fragile. The Chimu made it using two hollowed gourds attached to a very long string. Experts at the Smithsonian think it worked just like an early string telephone. You spoke into the gourd and the person on the other end held the other gourd to their ear and listened to the speaker's voice. Ramiro Matos said it was likely designed specifically for elite members of society. Some king or high-level official would have used it to boss around their slaves somewhere else in the palace. One question still remains. How did the Chimu figure out telephone technology 1,000 years before another civilization figured it out? If that's not advanced, I don't know what is. Dinosaurs and the Khmer Empire. I would love to believe that in the 12th century, the Khmer Empire had stables full of dinosaurs. Forget about horses. Khmer warriors rode stegosauruses into battle. There's even proof of it at the temple monastery of Ta Prohm in Cambodia. The temple was constructed under the orders of Jayavarman VII in honor of his mother. It was a very sweet thing for the king to do, building such a grand temple to cherish his mother's memory. The temple is decorated in many bas-reliefs of animals and mythical beasts. Most of the animals are pretty common creatures like lizards and boars and water buffalo. But one of the animals isn't so common. On one of the columns is the image of what is unmistakably a stegosaurus. It's hard not to see a stegosaurus when you look at this bas-relief. Many believe the ancient carving is proof that dinosaurs coexisted with humans. But is it really? Mainstream scientists dismiss the fringe theories altogether and say the stegosaurus is in fact a rhinoceros. I don't know about you, but I've never seen a rhinoceros with dinosaur spikes on its back. Maybe the artist did a poor job. Maybe it's a modern hoax. Or maybe this world is not as it appears. Perhaps dinosaurs still thrived in the jungles of Southeast Asia before the Khmer Empire crumbled in the 15th century. But most likely, probably not. Star holes. There are some very strange and very precise holes carved into ancient rock. Star holes, sometimes called pentagonal holes, are so smooth and perfect they seem modern. They've been discovered across North America and nobody can figure out what they are. Do these strange holes represent a fantastic technology used by Native Americans? Or were the mysterious holes left long before humans walked the earth? One of the best places to see star holes is at the Flint Quarry in Monson, Massachusetts. They can be seen drilled into the smooth white bedrock, almost like the indent of a cookie cutter. Each hole is a perfect star or a pentagram punched into solid stone. No flint or obsidian tools could have done such a thing. There is a lot of speculation surrounding ancient building techniques from Egypt to Peru. The Egyptians were famous for drilling perfectly smooth boreholes. Examples of them can be seen across the country. People have tried to explain how the Egyptians did it, but nothing really makes sense. They should have needed electric tools to make such perfect holes. The one thing I can say is that at least the Egyptians drilled circular holes. The star holes of North America don't make any sense. How do you drill a star shape? While most are 5-pointed stars, there are others with 6 or even 12 points. All of them are totally smooth, like they were made using lasers. The star holes aren't only in Massachusetts. A large number of the holes were found across New England. One large example was discovered at Ordeon Point in New Hampshire. Another star hole was found blasted into a glacial erratic, a type of rock, in the Johnstown forest. On a large boulder in Cape Cod, covered in years and years of bat guano, there is another unmistakable star hole. Another thing about the advanced drill holes of ancient Egypt and Peru is that there, the holes can be found on building blocks for monuments. In North America, the star holes are on random blocks of stone that don't appear to have been used for anything. What was the point of drilling them? Who drilled them? And how long ago? None of these questions have ever been answered. What is real? This one is really going to blow your mind. How do you explain a human artifact found deep under the ground, lodged inside a piece of coal that formed before humans existed? You really can't explain it, so you dismiss it as an out-of-place artifact. But are these bizarre artifacts real or elaborate hoaxes? In June of 1891, there was a report in an Illinois newspaper. A modern artifact had been found in a lump of coal from a mine in South Illinois. According to the Illinois State Geological Survey, the coal formed between 260 and 320 million years ago. That was during an era known as the Carboniferous period, before dinosaurs even existed. The artifact in question was a small gold chain about 10 inches long and of obviously antique workmanship. It broke out of a solid lump of coal as if it were hatching from an egg. The artifact wasn't just found near the coal. It wasn't accidentally dropped by one of the miners. The coal made it all the way to a woman named Mrs. Culp, and when she dropped the lump of coal, the necklace burst out of it. This thing had been locked inside the coal, presumably for millions of years. But these kinds of things happen a lot, so what's the explanation? I tried looking for one, but so far, no luck. There is no explaining it. It makes zero sense. It makes about as much sense as the iron pot found inside another piece of coal in Oklahoma in 1912. You can see the pot for yourself at the Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas. The pot even came with a signed affidavit from Frank J. Kenwood of Sulphur Springs, Arkansas. Frank swore that he was the one who broke the piece of coal with his sledgehammer in 1912. From the broken lump fell the small iron pot. A friend and fellow employee, Jim Stahl, witnessed the whole thing with his own eyes. This particular piece of coal was even older than the one in Illinois, dated at roughly 312 million years old. I could go on all day with examples. There was a brass bell discovered in a chunk of coal in West Virginia in 1944. The bell is said to be 300 million years old and has a Hindu deity carved on top of it. Try to make sense of that one. Or try to make sense of the Indian pipe holder discovered in England in 1852. The artifact was found during a blast in Dorchester, blown out of solid putting stone 15 feet deep. Even though it was buried way underground and stuck in the solid rock, the artifact was identical to pipe holders made in India in the 19th century. Unless it teleported from the factory floor in India to inside a solid rock in England, I see no logical explanation. Do you? If you don't, join the club. Taken individually, these stories can be dismissed as accidental phenomena, but when you look at them all at once, it seems that something unusual is going on. Why do you think these artifacts keep popping up like this? And now for a quick break because it's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to Crystals4092 and Mario Villarreal for supporting this channel. We wouldn't be here without you guys. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like this. The oldest structure in the world. I have a question for you. When do you think the oldest log cabin in the world was built? Was it a lumberjack settler in the 17th century with a grizzled beard and a bit of plaid? Or was it an indigenous group 13,000 years ago wearing nothing but loincloths? Sorry, but neither of those answers come close to the truth. Scientists in Zambia have discovered what appears to be the oldest wooden structure on the planet. The scientists found evidence of a log cabin that was built 476,000 years ago. That's over 100 times older than the oldest pyramids in Egypt. The amazing discovery was made thanks to scientists at the University of Liverpool. Professor Larry Barham led the excavations at Kalambo Falls in Zambia in Africa. It's an area rich in prehistoric material, including evidence of human habitation throughout the Stone Age and into modern times. Nobody expected to find evidence of a house, an actual wooden house, from almost 500,000 years ago. Along with the house, archaeologists found wooden tools, such as a wedge, a digging implement, and a notched branch. All evidence points to very early hominins having basic understanding of architecture. Do you know when modern humans appeared in the evolutionary timeline? I'll give you a hint. It wasn't 476,000 years ago. Modern Homo sapiens have only existed, according to all scientific evidence currently known, for 350,000 years. Whoever built this log cabin in Africa wasn't human as we know it. They could have only belonged to an even older species of hominin. That's as far as the discovery goes for now. Archaeologists have proof of a house built by an unknown creature that clearly possessed superior knowledge. Did humans walk with dinosaurs? This is a big question, and the answer could come as a huge surprise. At the Paluxy River in Glen Rose, Texas, there are dinosaur tracks right next to human tracks. In Dinosaur Valley State Park, human footprints have been discovered in the exact same layer of stone as dinosaur footprints. The evidence seems to suggest that humans walked alongside dinosaurs prior to the asteroid that made our reptilian friends go extinct. There are dozens of convincing footprints that have been found in the Paluxy River area. For example, the human footprint, which is partially destroyed by a potential pterodactyl footprint. It looks as if the huge reptilian bird stepped on the human print shortly after it was made. Were dinosaurs really following in the footsteps of humans in a literal sense? To understand, I need to tell you a little more about the Paluxy River. The dinosaur prints here are genuine. In the Cretaceous era, over 66 million years ago, a great sea was rapidly withdrawing from this part of North America. As the sea withdrew, it left behind a vast swamp. Dinosaurs walked through the swamp, leaving their footprints in the mucky terrain. Under the fierce sun, the footprints were baked and fossilized. You can even fossilize your own footprints. Leave a couple of tracks in the mud on a sunny day and come back later to find your prints hard as stone. The dinosaur footprints in the Paluxy River started to be excavated in the 1930s. Most were taken to the American Museum of Natural History. The river is a little fickle. Sometimes it floods, sometimes it goes completely dry. When the river is dry, you can walk along its bottom and find yourself saber-toothed cat tracks and dinosaur tracks, and maybe some human tracks. The reason I say maybe is that experts are torn on the subject. Creationists believe that certain tracks found here were definitely made by humans 120 million years ago. Paleontologists don't think that's true. Many scientists have dismissed the alleged human tracks as nothing but elongated dinosaur footprints. One of the most contested sets of tracks is the Taylor Trail. The trail does look as if a person made the footprints while walking across the swamp. However, scientists think the prints came from a dinosaur with suspiciously human-like feet. There is another track that's even more suspicious in neighboring New Mexico. It's called the Zapata track. This one is a perfectly preserved human footprint embedded in a piece of Permian limestone from 250 million years ago. The Zapata track is over twice as old as the Taylor Trail in Texas. The footprint is from about 10 million years before the first dinosaur evolved. If this track is real, it proves that humans were on Earth before dinosaurs. It's not even that tough to imagine. If huge lumbering lizards as tall as skyscrapers could evolve, so could humans. Did medieval Asia and Britain interact? Two coins that don't make any sense were discovered at two separate sites in England. The mysterious coins from nearly 1,000 years ago represent a previously unknown link between medieval Asia and medieval Britain. What were these two cultures up to? The first mysterious coin was discovered in 2018 in Cheshire. It was the very first Chinese coin from the Northern Song dynasty ever found in England. Now, a second one has been found in a field near Petersfield. Dr. Caitlin Green from the University of Cambridge said one of the coins was found 20 miles from where the only medieval piece of imported medieval Chinese pottery in England was discovered. There must be some sort of correlation. These coins could prove there was a lot more travel back and forth between Britain and China than previously thought. Marco Polo became the first famous European to travel through Asia in the 13th century, but these coins were minted around 1068 AD, meaning there was already trade going on. Similarly dated English coins have even been found as far away as Vietnam. So, did they have a closer relationship than we think? Let me know in the comments. Why is Maya plaster so strong? There is a mystery to solve when it comes to Mayan engineering. Specifically, how they managed to make such magnificently strong plaster. You've most likely heard of Roman concrete before and how it was even better than modern concrete, even though it was invented 2,000 years ago. There is a similar phenomenon with Maya lime plaster. Scientists have always wondered how ancient Mayan structures have survived so long in the humid jungles of Mexico and Central America. Now, a group of researchers from the University of Granada think they've figured it out. It should not be underestimated how strong the sun is in places like Guatemala and Honduras. The tropical humidity and blazing sunlight is enough to ruin even the most high-tech buildings if they go unmaintained for decades. But in Honduras's Copan Valley, there are still Maya structures standing that were built in the 5th century AD. These structures aren't just standing, but standing proudly and hardly damaged. Don't think for a second that this is a widespread thing in Mesoamerica. Aztec structures that were built in central Mexico centuries after the Maya of Honduras were gone have crumbled. The Maya did something that made their buildings far stronger than those of the Aztec, even though they were much older. Scientists traveled to the Copan archaeological zone and took samples from the ancient city. They also consulted modern Maya descendants who still live in the area. The results of this study showed that certain types of biological material helped create an insoluble lime plaster. The Maya used sap from the jiote tree to create plaster that was nearly indestructible. But here's the deal. The Maya weren't the first ones to come up with limestone plaster. Almost every civilization figured out how to use plaster. Take a bit of limestone, heat it to 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, then mix with water. It's a simple procedure, but the Maya went a step further and added sap. Adding just one single extra ingredient made a significant difference. It's why the Maya buildings are still standing, while many Aztec ruins are crumbled. A mace out of place. A weapon you typically only see in RPG games was just discovered by amateur archaeologists in Poland. It turned out to be a baffling discovery because the weapon is 3,000 years old and doesn't belong to any known culture. This awesome weapon is a mace, a giant spiky piece of metal attached to a stick. It's a weapon as old as war itself. And although these may have been used in Poland during the Bronze Age, this particular type wasn't. It looks as if it came from the Middle East. Scientists are trying to figure out how it ended up buried near Dukla. Amateur archaeologists weren't looking for ancient treasure, so they were pretty astounded by what they found. They initially went looking for artifacts from World War II. The guys had received information that an unknown battle happened in the area in 1939. As they were digging, they found a handful of shells that were likely fired during the fighting. They also found some coins and the head of the Bronze Age mace. The mace must have been used in a much earlier battle. The fact it was lost with artifacts from a modern war is kind of spooky. How common do you think the mace was in the ancient world? You always see warriors wielding shields and swords, but maces were just as popular, especially in the Middle East and ancient Egypt. They were extremely effective for crushing skulls. These weapons were also easy to make. Before people figured out how to mold steel into deadly swords, they worked with what they had available. This typically meant taking a spiky block of stone or bone, copper, bronze, and attaching it to a heavy stick. The big mystery here is the origin of the weapon. There is no similar example anywhere in this part of Europe. The mace, dating from 1000 BC, must have come from somewhere far away. It could have been brought through the Carpathian Mountains as part of an ancient trading route. Maybe it was owned by the commander of a foreign army who invaded the region as a part of a war that history forgot. There are a ton of potential explanations, but we don't know which one is correct. Ancient astronauts in Italy. One of the largest collections of prehistoric petroglyphs in the world is in Italy, in the province of Brescia. The rock engravings are spread across 180 locations, etched on over 2,000 rocks, and depicting a wide variety of things. It was the first UNESCO World Heritage Site recognized in Italy in 1979. There have been over 300,000 figures found. Some of them are out of this world. Before I tell you about the bizarre astronauts drawn in Brescia, you need to know about the prehistoric people who came here. When the last great glaciation, aka the Ice Age, wound down and the ice started melting, humans arrived in Val Camonica. This was a slow migration between 14,000 and 10,000 years ago. Then, for the next 10,000 consecutive years, all the way to the end of the 19th century, people drew things on the rocks. Some of the oldest and most mysterious carvings are known as the astronauts. They date back to 8,000 BC. The astronauts are anthropomorphic figures wearing spacesuits. These beings have what look like bubble helmets on their heads, like upside-down fish bowls. They also hold strange tools in their hands. While they aren't piloting spacecrafts, they do look weirdly like astronauts from another world. There are other strange petroglyphs here, such as the tall beings with horns sticking out of their heads. They look like horned giants and are strikingly similar to other petroglyphs found across the ocean in North America. The botched Jesus. I'm going to show you a picture that does not belong in any version of history anywhere. Yet here it is. The image is from the Associated Press. On the left side is the Ecce Homo fresco of Jesus Christ, badly damaged. On the right side is the restored version. What do you think? Did the artist capture the feeling of the original? Or is this the most botched restoration job in history? It was a mistake so incredible that people called it unholy. But in a weird twist of events, the botched restoration job turned a small town into the new must-see tourist destination. It all started in 2012 with amateur, and I do stress amateur, art restorer Cecilia Jimenez. Cecilia is from the small Spanish village of Borja. She wanted to fix the badly damaged face of Jesus Christ, which was painted in 1930 by Elias Garcia Martinez. When she was done, well, you've already seen the picture. There's no need to besmirch Cecilia's efforts further. Though I will say the botched job went viral, with thousands of people comparing it to a blurry potato or a monkey. 4 years later, in 2016, the town was flooded with tourists. Over 160,000 visitors arrived at the Sanctuary of Mercy Church. They all wanted to feast their eyes on the botched restoration. They couldn't get enough of the mugs and wine bottles and even teddy bears featuring Jesus Christ's blurry potato face. Locals got rich slinging all the merch they could produce. The moral of the story is that, actually, there really isn't much of a moral here. One woman's tragic art skills destroyed a religious painting, and the locals got rich for it. Historians are going to find the updated Ecce Homo fresco in 1,000 years and wonder what in the world happened. The robot statues. The Maya were pretty advanced, but could they also have figured out robots? To understand, I must take you to the ruins of Oxquintoc, located about 60 miles from the Mexican city of Mérida. Most of the city is completely destroyed. In fact, many of the buildings are so destroyed they look as if they were flattened by some great hydraulic press. They sort of look like a giant stepped on them, crumbling the buildings like an empty can under the foot. Nobody knows quite what happened to cause the destruction here. It's been suggested there was a flood, perhaps a giant tsunami that washed away the buildings or left the temples in tatters. The real mystery was found in a small courtyard outside the center of the city. Here was discovered a fragmented temple and its broken columns. The columns were carved with figures that are not common in the world of the Maya. To be blunt, they look like robots. When you go from city to city investigating ancient Maya ruins, you get a feel for what's normal. The figures carved into the columns at Oshkintok look so strange that they might not even be Mayan. Some of the statues were transported to the Anthropological Museum in Mexico City. Others were taken to the Natural History Museum in Mérida. All of them look like they were wearing protective armor. Archaeologists think they could be guards or warriors, but many people have noted how they are shaped like primitive robots. They have bulging eyes that suggest they were wearing goggles. One has the typical square head of a 1950s toy robot. There is a theory as to how these figures arrived at Oshkintok. Prepare yourself because it goes right into the realm of the weird. It has been suggested by some experts, including award-winning podcast producer Cliff Dunning, that the figures were in this city before the Maya arrived. It could be that the figures were carved by a different culture in a different era, a totally unknown historical epoch in which Mexico was populated by a more advanced society. The figurines may have already been in ruins when the classic Maya arrived and repopulated the jungle after a catastrophe. This might explain why so much of Oshkintok looks as if a bomb went off. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments. King David, fact or fiction? How many biblical kings can you name without cheating? King Solomon, right? He was a big one. And you probably know King David, the shepherd who slayed Goliath with his sling and became a powerful ruler. But what you might not know is how much of David's story is real and how much could be just a fairy tale. Historians mostly agree that David was a real figure who ruled a kingdom around 1000 BC, but they can't agree on how big that kingdom was. Now, Professor Josef Garfinkel of the Institute of Archaeology at Hebrew University thinks he has an answer. The professor may have just proven the Bible to be historically accurate, at least when it comes to King David. Professor Garfinkel has linked 5 ancient cities in the region of Judea that were founded about 3,000 years ago. He looked through old archaeological publications to find the cities. Each one was excavated separately, so none of them were ever connected properly. Now, Garfinkel is using the cities as potential proof that King David ruled a mighty empire. When it comes to King David, there are 2 major schools of thought. One is that David was a Bedouin leader who ruled over no more than a couple thousand shepherds near Jerusalem. The other school of thought is that David ruled a humongous empire that included fortified cities near Jerusalem. The Bible says that King David was the latter. He ruled a great and powerful nation according to biblical texts. The issue has always been that there isn't a lot of evidence. In fact, some scientists don't even think that David was real. Danish scholar Niels Peter wrote, "It is likely the tales about King David are as historical as the legends are about King Arthur." This all changed in 1993. Archaeologist Avraham Biran uncovered an inscription in northern Israel. The inscription had one line that shocked the scientific community. That one line was, "The House of David." This was the first confirmation that King David was a real ruler. The debate only shifted from there. Okay, King David was real, but did he have an empire? An academic battle broke out in Israel over how big David's kingdom was. Israel Finkelstein, a local archaeologist, published a paper claiming that David was little more than a warrior chief who commanded sheep herders. The debate is still raging today, though Professor Garfinkel's proof does seem to confirm the Bible's version is the accurate one. But if David really did rule such a great big kingdom, why has his name only ever been found once? Pharaoh Ramses the Great was king of Egypt 200 years before King David, and he has monumental statues that still stand across the whole country. But again, David's name only shows up once. A Byzantine coin in Viking territory. An object was found in the mountains of Norway that should not have been found in the mountains of Norway. The object is a rare Byzantine coin minted in Constantinople over 1,000 years ago. It was uncovered by an archaeologist with a metal detector 1,600 miles from its home. How did the coin end up in such a remote place? Maybe you can figure it out because scientists are stumped. The coin was dated to between 977 and 1025 AD. During this time, there were several mints operating in the Byzantine Empire's capital of Constantinople. The coin is in fantastic condition, depicting Jesus Christ holding a Bible on one side. Above Jesus is a Latin inscription that reads, "Jesus Christ, King of those who reign." On the other side of the coin are the emperors Basil and Constantine. This was a standard coin that you could use to pay for goods and services, the exact same as currency today. But how did it end up in Norway? The best guess archaeologists have is that the coin was owned by none other than Harald III, legendary king of Norway. Harald ruled from 1045 to 1066. But before he became king, he served as a guardian for Byzantine royalty in the 1030s. Nicknamed Harald the Ruthless, the king may have pillaged the coin during his time in Byzantium and then lost it in his home nation of Norway. That's a pretty fanciful story, though. It assumes the coin belonged to a king who stole it from an emperor. The truth is that the gold coin was found on a random mountain near nothing else of note. It could have been brought there by a crow, for all anyone knows. What do you think? Do you like collecting coins? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and be sure to hit that subscribe button and stick around for older content you might have missed.
Jade Maya pendant. In 2015, archaeologists working in the somewhat remote region of Nimli Punit in southern Belize discovered a large T-shaped jade pendant containing mysterious carved hieroglyphs. It's the second largest Jade Maya artifact ever found in the country, measuring 7.4 inches wide, 4.1 inches high, and 0.3 inches thick. Kings wore pendants like this during important ceremonies and were often buried with them. But this pendant was found with just a few teeth among the remains of a palace in an area known to contain few Maya artifacts. It dates back to around 800 AD and was found amid a collection of other objects, including pottery and a stone sculpture of a deity. It was like finding the Hope Diamond in Peoria instead of New York, lead researcher Geoffrey Braswell said of the discovery. We would expect something like it in one of the big cities of the Maya world. Instead, here it was, far from the center. Even more impressively, the pendant is the first artifact of its type bearing historical inscriptions. The etchings have not been fully deciphered, but they date the pendant back to the year 672 and tell the story of the leader who wore the piece, King Janab ol Kiinich. Furthermore, the text explains that he was from a city in modern-day Belize located a 5-hour drive from where the pendant was found. Prior to the discovery, researchers had not really thought about the sites being connected, since they are separated by thick forest and a mountain range. Braswell believes that a new dynasty was founded at Nimli Punit around the time the pendant was used. Any glory it may have had was short-lived, however. Around 800 AD, the Maya civilization collapsed throughout Belize and Guatemala, and Nimli Punit was abandoned within a decade of the pendant's burial. The reasons for the widespread desertion of Maya kingdoms in the region are just as much of a mystery as the pendant itself. It's possible that climate change caused crops to die out, causing the civilization to perish. But all experts can do for now is speculate as they continue to search for an explanation. The Guide to the Underworld. In late 2019, archaeologists uncovered the oldest known copy of the Book of Two Ways, an ancient Egyptian guide and map of the underworld. It is so old it is a precursor to the Book of the Dead. The book details the ancient Egyptian underworld and the two paths to Rostau, the glorious realm of Osiris, the god of death. The two ways refers to taking the path over land or the path over water that are separated by a lake of fire. Experts believe that it may be the first illustrated book in history, and the recently discovered copy dates back an estimated 4,000 years. Smithsonian Magazine reports that the newest, or technically oldest, copy of the Book of Two Ways joins just 24 others known to modern archaeologists. A paper published in the Journal of Egyptian Archaeology describes the recently discovered book, which predates the other copies by roughly 40 years. Overlooked by grave robbers and previous archaeologists, it was discovered in 2012 in a coffin during excavations of a burial shaft in the town of Deir al-Barsha. The inscriptions, which were written inside of the sarcophagus of a high-status woman named Ankh, and other artifacts in the grave, date back to the reign of Pharaoh Mentuhotep II, who ruled until around 2010 BC. Despite its well-documented history, researchers struggle to understand many elements of the Book of Two Ways. The text was a common fixture in Egyptian graves, and the text describes demons, spirits, and fire that can be overcome only by special spells. The maps in the book are full of strange figures and symbols that have been very difficult to understand. There are also special rituals described in the book, probably meant to bring back deceased gods or humans from the dead. Death was life, and rebirth made you closer to Osiris himself. Ask and you shall receive. Wanted to give a big shout out to Hamza Qureshi and OCD Gamers. Thanks so much for supporting this channel. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and join the Origins Explained family. Out-of-place footprints. While examining the ancient footprints of extinct elephants, camels, buffalo, and horses in the preserved sediment of an ancient lakebed in the Nafud Desert in northern Saudi Arabia, archaeologists spotted 7 human-like prints that they later determined date back between 112,000 and 121,000 years ago. The fascinating find quite possibly qualifies as the oldest evidence of Homo sapiens on the Arabian Peninsula. Discoveries like this challenge and complicate the long-standing belief that early humans first migrated out of Africa en masse around 60,000 years ago, by suggesting that at least some people left thousands of years earlier. At the time humans crossed through, the now arid desert was wetter and greener, much like the modern-day African savanna. No tools were found at the site, indicating that people only stopped briefly while passing through the region. It's admittedly possible that the footprints were left behind by Neanderthals, but a study concluded that they were more likely humans, who were taller and lighter. Plus, the timing of the footprints does not align with Neanderthals' entry into the region with cooler conditions. This and other recent discoveries just proves that scientists still have a lot to learn when it comes to understanding our human past. And we are pretty complicated. Sunken Spanish galleon in Australia. Shipwreck hunter and documentary maker Ben Kropp, who has discovered over 100 wrecks throughout his career, is determined to prove that the Spanish arrived in Australia over a century before Captain James Cook reached the East Coast in 1770. In April, the 84-year-old launched an expedition in search for a sunken Spanish galleon and 17th century gold mining settlement that he believes existed in far northern Queensland. Based on clues he found using ancient maps, hidden clues, historical research, and legends, Kropp believes that King Philip IV of Spain dispatched 3 expeditions to the region in search of gold during the 1640s. He cites Spain's contentious relationship with Great Britain during the 16th century as probable cause for the mission, theorizing that the Spanish sent explorers to find gold to finance the rebuilding of the Armada naval fleet that was destroyed in 1588. Consequently, according to Kropp, at least one ship wound up in what is now the small town of Bamanga on the northern tip of Cape York. Furthermore, he believes that the ship's crew probably engraved a rock with the year and the vessel's name in accordance with the traditions of the time. Perhaps they found gold, mined it, and left, burying whatever temporary settlements they had built before setting off for Spain. Along the way, the ship allegedly met some destructive fate, with its crew and loot never to be seen again. Kropp believes that the sunken remains of the speculative vessel are out there waiting to be discovered. He is also searching for other artifacts that may help prove his seemingly far-flung theory, including the engraved stone and a cannon he heard about but has not found after 8 years of looking. Unfortunately, it seems as though Kropp has more leads than actual finds, and that his tireless efforts have proven fruitless thus far. Nevertheless, he is determined to prove that his suspicions are correct. Viking DNA. Much of what experts thought they knew about the ethnicity of Vikings was upended in September 2020, when researchers sequenced the genomes of 442 men, women, and children from archaeological sites throughout Europe and Greenland as part of the largest ever Viking DNA study. The team also analyzed the genetic information of 3,855 individuals who currently live in places with known Viking contact, including Denmark, Sweden, and the UK. To the researchers' surprise, it appears as though Vikings interbred pretty regularly with the populations they encountered. Lead study author Eski Willerslev said, "We found genetic differences between different Viking populations within Scandinavia, which shows Viking groups in the region were far more isolated than previously believed." The evidence shows a pattern of DNA traveling northward to Scandinavia from southern Europe and Asia prior to the Viking Age. In fact, some of the Vikings were genetically not Scandinavian at all, with one individual turning out to be from the Pict ancient warrior culture. Simply put, this means that the Vikings' DNA, culture, and customs likely had more complex roots than experts previously believed. This study, like many, led to more questions that researchers must now focus on answering, including who the Vikings actually were. Strange tomb inscription. Israel's Beit Guvrin Maresha National Park is home to two ancient excavated cities situated in the Judean foothills in an area known as the Land of 1,000 Caves. Both were founded in the 3rd century and served as diverse multicultural hubs, owing to their placement along trade routes. Excavations at the site began in the early 20th century and resumed during the 1980s and 90s, and its biggest mystery is also its oldest. In 1902, a pair of explorers named John Peters and Herman Thiersch found a remarkable cave tomb containing burial alcoves and a collection of Greek inscriptions and graffiti. Named the Sidonian Cave or Apollophanes Cave, it's Israel's only known painted cave from the Hellenistic period. Most of its inscriptions are the names of the dead, along with some ominous statements like, "This is also taken," and "Do not disturb the girl," and the alcoves are surrounded by paintings of animals and mythical creatures. But one etching above a painting of the multi-headed dog Cerberus leaves experts baffled to this day, stating, "There is nothing left I could do for you or anything that will give you pleasure. I lay with another, but I love you, the one most dear to me. In the name of Aphrodite, I am glad of one thing, that I have your coat for collateral, but I flee and leave you to your freedom. Do as you will, do not bang on the wall, the noise is heard inside. We will signal each other with movements. Let this be our signal." Peters and Thiersch believed that the message was between two lovers. Others have suggested that the cryptic carving was a playful love poem or a message from a prostitute to her client warning him to pay up. In any case, would you want that on your tombstone? Of course, the messages are part of the intrigue. What do you think it means? Let us know in the comments below. Cave tools. Earlier this year, an international research team led by Paleolithic archaeologist Dr. Jonathan Hawes revealed the discovery of ancient stone tools in Lapa do Picareiro, a cave near central Portugal's Atlantic coast. These tools indicate that modern humans arrived in westernmost Europe 5,000 years earlier than experts previously thought, rewriting the history of this settlement of Europe. Found at the site were stone tools made by modern humans called Aurignacian tools. They are shaped and carved into rudimentary blades. The artifacts, which are similar to discoveries at other sites across Eurasia and the Russian plain, date back to a time when scientists thought Neanderthals inhabited westernmost Europe, complicating their understanding of the interactions between the two hominids. What was it like when modern humans came together with Neanderthals? Did they take over? Did they mix? This is a long-standing unsolved issue. Based on some people's DNA, it looks like they sometimes assimilated and had children, but it was not the norm. Our ancestors and Neanderthals, for the most part, remained separate. How do researchers know that? Neanderthals never adopted this stone technology. It looks like modern humans outcompeted the Neanderthals. We're just too quick, too smart, and too tough. The corny history of maize. One of the world's most important crops, corn or maize, became a domestic crop sometime around 9,000 years ago. Author Michael Pollan said there is every reason to believe that corn has succeeded in domesticating us. We would go where the corn was and stay there. Ancient societies in what is now southwestern Mexico began selectively breeding teosinte, a wild grass with a tough, fibrous casing and very few kernels. Not the delicious yellow corn we think of today, but after thousands of years, teosinte evolved into one of the earliest, most reliable crops. When the Europeans arrived to the Americas, they quickly learned how important it was, and they spread it all over the world. While now everyone probably thinks that corn is boring since it is so common, there are actually things about it that we still don't understand. In an effort to get to the bottom of things, a team of Smithsonian researchers conducted a study using DNA from 5,000-year-old maize cobs from a cave in Mexico, and they discovered that it was still in the domestication process. It didn't just start in Mexico and then spread, but was domesticated in several places, creating a mismatch of evolutionary history. The study concluded that people traveled southward from Mexico to Central and South America with partially domesticated corn, and that they domesticated it at the same time in different areas and at different speeds. Then people traveled back north and reintroduced corn to Mexico, where more productive hybrid versions were bred. There are admittedly still gaps in corn's history, but the reason it's so important is that us humans grow more corn than any other plant on the planet. If anything were to happen to our corn crops, we would be in really big trouble. so it is important to understand where corn came from and how it can adapt to changes in its environment. You might not care about corn now, but you would if something happened to it. Pompei Graffiti. Researchers have no doubt that Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD, burying nearby towns like Pompeii and Herculaneum in ash, but they have long debated what time of year the disaster occurred. In 2018, archaeologists discovered ancient graffiti on the wall of a house that was being renovated during that year, potentially shedding light on this unanswered question. Ancient texts written by Pliny the Elder suggest that Mount Vesuvius erupted on or around August 24th, but the people who made copies of these letters may have mistaken the date, because mounting evidence in recent years suggests that the catastrophe happened during the fall, after crops were harvested, and amid wind conditions that were characteristic of that time of year. Written in Latin, the graffiti describes an individual who overate and was scribbled on a partially finished wall in charcoal. It was found among artifacts that date back to the fall, including a coin that was minted in September or later in 79 AD. Moreover, the graffiti wouldn't have lasted long in a normal environment, putting the eruption's likely date at sometime in October. Knowing exactly when Mount Vesuvius erupted can provide important historical information, helping experts better understand things like the seasonal spread of disease. Just a 2-month discrepancy could make a major difference in accurately tracking disease patterns, making it more important than it may seem to know exactly when the event occurred. Thanks to whoever scrawled a seemingly annoyed message on the wall while working on the house, experts are one step closer to confirming the actual date, or at least month, of Vesuvius's eruption. Thanks for watching! Remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!